Here is something that never fails to surprise organizations. When we run a proper data inventory exercise, the number of systems holding personal data typically comes in at 2 to 3 times what the IT team originally listed. Not 10% more, 2 to 3 times. Think about what that means. Most organizations are protecting a version of themselves that only partly exists. I remember asking a client CIO how many systems held customer data. He said 9 without hesitation, confident. 6 weeks later, the verified number was 31. He was not lying. He genuinely did not know, and neither did anyone else. So, what will you get from this chapter? You will learn to verify a data inventory rather than accept one. You will examine records of processing for accuracy, not existence. You will test purpose limitation and find where the stated purpose and actual use quietly diverge. You will audit data minimization, storage limitation and retention, accuracy requirements, and data classification. Then you will learn how to actually test processing controls rather than discuss them. And you will finish with a practical processing activities audit checklist you can take into any engagement. This is the chapter where the audit stops being about paperwork and starts being about data. Let us go find it. So let us start with the inventory, and I want to be very clear about the word I am using. Verification, not review, not collection. Verification. Here is the difference. A review asks, is the inventory complete and well formatted? Verification asks, is it true? And those are wildly different exercises. Let me show you my approach. I never start with the inventory document. I start somewhere else entirely and work back to it. I ask finance for a list of every software vendor they pay, every single one. Then I take that list and I check it against the inventory. Do you know what happens? Names appear that are not on the inventory. A survey tool, a scheduling app, an email marketing platform someone in a regional office bought on a company card 3 years ago. I did this at a services client. The inventory had 14 systems. The vendor payment list revealed 9 more that clearly touched personal data. One was a recruitment platform still holding 4 years of candidate records, paid for monthly, forgotten by everyone except accounts payable. So triangulate: vendor payments, network traffic, login directories, departmental interviews. And here is the question I always ask each department head. Where do you keep information about people that is not in an official system? Ask it kindly. Ask it without judgment. People will tell you because they have been waiting for someone to ask. So now we come to records of processing, and I want you to notice something about the word record. It implies something written down after the fact, a record of what happened. But here is what I find in practice. Most records of processing are written in advance, describing what someone intends to happen. And then nobody ever goes back and checks whether reality followed the plan. Let me give you an example. An insurance client had a genuinely detailed processing record. Purpose, categories, recipients, retention, all documented, impressive on paper. Then I picked one entry, claims processing. It listed 3 recipients. So I sat with the claims team and asked, who do you actually send this to? They named the 3. Then someone added, oh, and the investigation agency for anything above 5 lakh. And then someone else said, and the reinsurer gets a monthly extract. 5 recipients. The record said 3. And that record had been reviewed and approved twice. So how do you audit this properly? Do not read the record and ask, is it complete? Read the record, then go to the people doing the work and rebuild it from scratch with them. Then compare. The gaps are always in the same places. Recipients nobody remembered. Purposes that grew quietly. Retention periods nobody enforces. A record is a claim. Test it like one. So let us talk about purpose limitation, and I think this is the most quietly violated principle in the entire act. Here is why. Nobody wakes up and decides to misuse data. What happens is much more human than that. Purpose creep. Let me tell you a story. A client collected mobile numbers for delivery notifications. Perfectly legitimate. Notice said so, everyone happy. Then, the marketing team had a slow quarter, and someone said, "We have all these numbers, why not send a promotional message?" And someone else said, "Well, they are our customers." And nobody in that room was being malicious, they were being resourceful. But the notice said delivery notifications, and now it was doing marketing. Do you see how easy that was? No decision was made, no approval was sought, it just drifted. So, how do you audit it? You go backwards. Start with the actual processing and ask what purpose was stated for this, not the other way around. Because if you start with the purpose and ask what happens, people will describe what should happen. I do this by pulling the notice, then pulling a list of every system the data touches, then asking for each one, which stated purpose does this serve? The moment someone hesitates, you have found it. Hesitation means they are constructing a justification rather than recalling one. Purpose creep is not a scandal, it is erosion. Look for it. Now, minimization. And here is the question I want you to carry into every engagement. Why do you collect this? Simple question. It embarrasses almost everyone. Let me tell you about a form I reviewed at a client. Newsletter sign up. They collected name, email, phone number, date of birth, city, and gender for a newsletter. So I asked, why the date of birth? And the marketing manager said, for age segmentation. So I said, show me a campaign where you segmented by age. Long pause. They had never done it. Not once in 4 years. Why the phone number? For urgent updates. Had they ever sent one? No. Why gender? Nobody knew. It had been on the form since before anyone currently employed had joined. 4 years of collecting data they never used. 4 years of risk for nothing. So here is my technique, and it is brutally simple. Take any collection point, list every field. Then for each field, ask 2 questions. What do you use this for? And show me the last time you used it. That second question is where it falls apart. Because intention is easy to claim. Usage leaves traces. And remember, unused data is not harmless data. It is a liability with no upside. You carry all of the risk and none of the benefit. Ask why, then ask for proof. So we have talked about not collecting too much. Now let us talk about not keeping it too long. And I will be honest, this is where I find the biggest gaps in almost every audit. Here is the pattern. Every organization has a retention policy. Nearly every one of them fails at the same point. Nobody has built the thing that actually deletes. Let me give you an example. A client's policy said customer data is retained for 7 years after account closure. Clear, reasonable, defensible. So I asked, what happens on day 1 of year 8? And the answer was, the data is deleted. So I said, by whom? By what system? Triggered how? Silence. There was no mechanism. The policy described an outcome nobody had engineered. It was a promise, not a process. And this is so common. The policy is the easy part. Writing 7 years takes 10 seconds. Building a job that identifies eligible records, checks for legal holds, deletes across primary systems, replicas, backups, and archives, and then logs that it happened, that takes months. So here is what you test. Ask for evidence of deletion, not the policy, the proof, a log, a report, a record showing that on a specific date, a specific number of records were removed. And then the killer question, what about backups? I have never asked that question and received a comfortable answer, not once. Retention without deletion is just storage with an excuse. So let us talk about accuracy, and I think this is the most underrated obligation in the Act. Everyone focuses on security and consent. Almost nobody audits whether the data is actually correct. But think about what inaccurate data does. It is not an abstract problem. Let me tell you about a case that stayed with me. A lending client had a customer whose address had been entered wrong during onboarding. A digit transposed. Small thing. Then he defaulted, and the recovery notices went to the wrong house. For 8 months. To a family who had no idea who this man was and grew increasingly alarmed. One wrong digit, 2 households harmed. So how do you audit accuracy? 3 angles. First, capture. Is there validation at the point of entry? Or can someone type anything into any field? Second, maintenance. When something changes, does the change propagate? I audited a client where updating your address in the mobile app corrected 2 systems out of 6. The other 4 kept the old one, quietly, forever. Third, correction. When someone tells you it is wrong, how fast does it get fixed? And everywhere. That word everywhere is doing the work. Correction in one system while 5 others hold the error is not correction. It is a partial apology. Accuracy is not a data quality issue. Under DPDP, it is a rights issue. So now let us talk about classification. And I want to start by asking, why does this even matter to an auditor? Here is why. Every other control depends on it. You cannot apply appropriate security if you do not know what is sensitive. You cannot set retention if you do not know what category the data falls into. Classification is the foundation everything else stands on. And it fails in the most predictable way. Let me show you. A client had a 3-tier classification scheme. Public, internal, confidential. Perfectly sensible. Then I pulled a sample of files from their shared drives and checked the labels. Roughly 70% were unlabeled. Of the labeled ones, a customer list with phone numbers and addresses was marked internal, and the cafeteria menu was marked confidential. So I asked how classification was applied, and the answer was whoever creates the document chooses. No guidance, no examples, no review. Do you see the problem? Classification by individual judgment is classification by mood. So what do you test? First, does a scheme exist with clear definitions and examples? Second, is it actually applied, and can you verify that with a sample? Third, and most importantly, does the label change anything? If confidential and internal get identical treatment, the label is decoration. Ask that last question early. If classification drives no control, it is just filing. Alright, so we have looked at what should be happening. Now let us talk about how you actually prove it, because this is the difference between an audit and an opinion. Here is the core idea. There are 3 ways to test, and they are not equal. The weakest is inquiry. You ask someone and they tell you. Useful for understanding, nearly worthless as evidence. Because people describe what should happen sincerely. Better is observation. You watch it happen. Now you know something, but you only know about that one moment, and people behave differently when watched. Strongest is reperformance and inspection. You do it yourself, or you examine the artifact the system produced when nobody was watching. Let me show you the difference. At a client, I asked whether deletion requests were fulfilled within the timeline. Yes, always. That was inquiry. Then I watched them process one. Smooth, quick. That was observation. Then I pulled the log of the last 40 requests and checked timestamps myself. 11 had exceeded the timeline. 3 had no completion record at all. Same control, 3 levels of testing, 3 different answers. So here is my rule. Inquiry tells you where to look. Observation tells you it is plausible. Only inspection tells you it is true. Never stop at the first one. That is not an audit. That is an interview. So let us bring this together into something practical you can carry into any engagement. Start with the inventory and never accept it. Get the vendor payment list from finance and compare. Ask every department head where they keep information about people outside official systems. Then take the processing record and rebuild one entry from scratch with the people who do the work. Compare recipients especially. That is where the gaps hide. For purpose, work backwards. Start with actual processing. Ask what purpose was stated. Watch for hesitation. For minimization, take any form, list every field, and ask for each one. Show me the last time you used this. For retention, skip the policy entirely. Ask for deletion evidence, a log, a date, a count. Then ask about backups and watch what happens. For accuracy, test propagation. Change something in one system and follow it. See how far it travels. For classification, sample 20 files and check labels. Then ask whether the label changes any control. And for everything, remember the testing ladder. Inquiry, observation, inspection. Climb it every time. Here is my closing question for this whole area. Show me one record and show me everything you know about it and everywhere it lives. If they cannot, that is your finding. So, let us look back at what we have covered, because this chapter took us from paperwork into the actual data. We started with inventory verification and learned to triangulate rather than accept, using vendor payments as a backdoor into the truth. We tested processing records as claims rather than facts and found the recipients nobody remembered. We hunted purpose creep and learned that it is erosion, not scandal. We attacked minimization with one brutal question: show me the last time you used this. We found that retention policies almost always describe outcomes nobody engineered and that the word backups reliably produces silence. We looked at accuracy as a rights issue rather than a data quality issue. We saw that classification which drives no control is just filing. And we climbed the testing ladder from inquiry to observation to inspection. If you carry one idea forward, carry this. Inquiry tells you where to look. Only inspection tells you the truth. Now, if you want a deeper, structured treatment of this material with role plays, quizzes, practice tests, and downloadable audit checklists and inventory templates, our Udemy course link is in the description below. And do subscribe to the channel if this is proving useful. The playlist link is also in the description, and clicking it gives you the complete list of every video in this masterclass in order. Next chapter: Consent and Data Principal Rights. See you there.